If you search for attachment theory on the internet today, you'll find people telling you about attachment styles and how to find out your attachment style. But what if I told you that John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, never used the term attachment style, and neither did any of his researchers? What if I told you that the open secret in attachment theory is that there are actually two versions of attachment theory? The original version, and a later misguided offshoot that's exploded in popularity. And it took me about 5 years of reading books and listening to podcasts before I figured this out. Hello and welcome to Attachment Maps. My name is Carl and I've been learning about attachment theory since 2018. I'm here to tell you things you won't hear anywhere else. In order to best explain attachment styles and these two versions of attachment theory, let's take a look at the history of attachment theory. The story of attachment theory starts with John Bowlby, a British psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. Bowlby started medical school in 1929, where he became fascinated by developmental psychology. He spent a lot of his life working with maladjusted and delinquent children, observing them, studying them, and forming hypotheses. This extended through World War II, which resulted in many children experiencing separations, hospitalizations, and even the loss of their parents. Bowlby's work led him to inform policy for the World Health Organization. However, it might surprise you that Bowlby's ideas about how early attachment relationships affected child development went against the prevailing current of his time. While he insisted that separations were harmful to children, most of his peers dismissed these ideas in favor of the more popular Freudian models that blamed children's fantasies for their distress. Psychology at the time was not convinced that real-life experiences had any significant effect on children's development. Bowlby knew he was onto something, but also knew he had to deliver a convincing case for his views. In order to develop his radical new theory, Bowlby had to go beyond his psychoanalytic training and bring together many fields of study, including cognitive psychology, evolutionary biology, and ethology, in order to create a strong theoretical foundation. Once his theories were developed, the next step was to test them. He wasn't a researcher, so he started working with Mary Ainsworth, an American-Canadian psychologist who began conducting studies for Bowlby in the late 60s. Ainsworth spent time in Uganda, observing mothers with their children before moving to the US and developing the now famous strange situation assessment. The first of its kind, this attachment assessment would study how infants responded to maternal separation. This experiment was the first to identify the distinct ways that human beings respond to attachment distress. They called these types of responses attachment patterns. In the early 80s, Mary Main, a student of Ainsworth's, helped bring attachment to the level of representation. You see, where the strange situation could only observe the behavior of infants, the adult attachment interview could now observe mental models of attachment. In other words, the thoughts and beliefs of adults, or even adolescents. The adult attachment interview, or AAI, was extremely effective, but it also became known as one of the most time-consuming and costly instruments in psychology. It often took a trained researcher over an hour to administer, and then several hours more to create a transcription, and then for a trained judge to interpret the results. Despite its costs, the AAI continues to be known as the gold standard of attachment assessments. Bowlby's thinking and clinical work, along with Ainsworth's research and theoretical contributions, helped make attachment theory one of the best theories in psychology. Bowlby lived long enough to see his theory of attachment become the dominant paradigm in child development. And while Bowlby went to great efforts to show attachment's relationship to development and psychopathology, and did acknowledge attachment's importance to the lifespan and adult romantic relationships, it was a topic that, for better or worse, was left mostly unexplored at the end of his career, when he died in 1990 at the age of 83. Denver, Colorado. The year is 1987. Philip Shaver and Cindy Hazan, both social psychologists from the University of Denver, wanted to explore loneliness, so they borrowed Bowlby's attachment categories and applied them to adult romantic relationships. So, how did they study adults? Did they use the adult attachment interview? No. They came up with a 22-item checklist that people could just answer themselves. They published this love quiz in a local newspaper, the Rocky Mountain News. They used factor analysis to group the responses into categories and then coined the term adult attachment style to refer to these categories. And because their results roughly matched the distributions of infant attachment patterns from the strange situation, they assumed they must be the same as the patterns that Bowlby and Ainsworth identified.
Yes, science!
This love quiz eventually evolved into the Experiences with Close Relationships questionnaire and other self-report assessments, which form the basis for today's online attachment quizzes. Hazan and Shaver continued their research and others joined them. Psychologists like Mario Michelintzer and Kim Bartholomew continued the social psychology tradition of attachment theory, while those who continued the work of Bowlby, Ainsworth, and Main were known as the developmental tradition of attachment theory. So, what's wrong with adult attachment styles and the social psychology approach? Let's break it down. While both claim to be attachment theory, both claim to be derived from Bowlby and Ainsworth, and both use similar terminology, developmental attachment theory and social psychology's attachment theory have vast differences in their constructs. Here are 4 main ways social psychology got it wrong. The way something is measured in psychology is a direct reflection of how it is understood. In the social psychology model, attachment is viewed as dimensional. Individuals can take true-false quizzes, add up the scores, and then place themselves on a continuum. 2 dimensions are used: avoidance versus anxiety, and a positive versus negative view of self and others. These were based on Millen's model of personality, so it's no surprise that dimensional assessments like this are how personality is typically measured. Mary Ainsworth, however, was a researcher and was intimately familiar with personality assessments as well as open-ended assessments like the Rorschach technique. She recognized early on that attachment was not a dimensional or personality construct, but a qualitative and organizational construct that was based in biology and thus needed to be assessed in adults with an instrument that employed narrative. In simple words, social psychology believes everyone can be measured along 2 dimensions of personality, while developmental attachment believes everyone should be classified into innate, self-organizing categories. Bowlby stressed that the attachment system can only be observed when it is activated. When the attachment system is put under stress, behavior or mental representations can be measured. There is no reason to believe that quizzes activate the attachment system. Social psychology quizzes measure an individual's conscious self-evaluation. Because they are self-report assessments, they measure what a person claims to be true about themselves and others, and their conscious beliefs about romantic relationships. Social expectations may also play a role in how people answer questions. The developmental model understands that people are more complex than that. People have specific defensive processes related to attachment, and this often results in them hiding thoughts or knowledge from their conscious mind. The developmental assessments are designed to surprise the unconscious, with little concern with what the individual claims. Instead, the assessment focuses on the individual's organization of thought based on their state of mind. One particular developmental assessment, the adult attachment projective, can even identify specific attachment defenses. Social psychologists have not only confused attachment with personality and identity, but also with other types of relationships. In the developmental school, attachment is a biological, innate system that seeks proximity, protection, and emotional support from an attachment figure. Bowlby and Ainsworth did not consider relationships with coworkers, friends, or short-term romantic partners as true attachment relationships. And the evidence shows that attachment does not shift from parent to a romantic partner until well into adulthood and only in long-term committed relationships. In social psychology, the concept of attachment has become so broad that today it's not just limited to romantic relationships, it's considered a theory of general human bonding. When social psychologists tried to internally validate their model, they studied the most convenient research demographic of them all, college students, who are at a time in their life when friendships and sexual relationships get a lot of their attention, and at a time when most of them are, according to developmentalists, still attached to their parents. Social psychologists claim that attachment shifts from parent to peers in adolescence, but the evidence shows that the only group that makes this transition so early are individuals with unresolved attachment, likely because they came from homes where they couldn't rely on their caregivers for protection and support. Social psychology attachment theory is a revisionist and reductionist version of attachment theory. They have oversimplified attachment to two-dimensional diagrams of personality. They've failed to consider attachment activation and the complications of defensive processes. And they've allowed the definition of attachment to widen so far that relationships with coworkers, friendships, even money are considered attachment relationships. What's clear to me is that developmental attachment theorists knew what they were talking about, and the social psychologists simply did not do their homework. They extrapolated concepts from attachment theory and then retroactively added Bowlby's ideas after their typology was already finalized. Look, I know a lot of this is probably way over a lot of people's heads, so here's the bottom line. Social psychology adult attachment style quizzes, although they were intended to measure attachment, are not equivalent to assessments developed by Ainsworth, Main, and their developmental colleagues. So, while assessments like the Strange Situation, the Adult Attachment Interview, and the Adult Attachment Projective have all been shown to measure the same thing, those free online quizzes don't measure anything even remotely close to what those original attachment assessments measure. Let me make this extra clear. Free online quizzes do not measure attachment. This has been admitted. There are several studies proving this, and I provide links in the description. All this means that due to poor methodology by social psychologists, adult attachment styles are inherently flawed. Attachment theory today is more popular than it's ever been. Let's be honest, a lot of this is due to social psychology's obsession with romantic relationships and its easy pop psychology approach.
I learned that all human beings exhibit at least one of 4 attachment styles. So click that link, take the quiz, and put an end to all of that today.
Hundreds of websites offer a free 5-minute attachment quiz to help you find out your attachment style.
I get asked all the time, what is my attachment style? What is my attachment style? What is my attachment style? So I have finally launched the attachment assessment.
There's something viral about romance. Most of our popular music today is centered on romantic relationships, and there's nothing quite like a romantic crisis to get us scrolling through YouTube videos. Unfortunately, real attachment theory has been buried under many layers of social psychology dating advice. Things have gotten so convoluted that it's hard to find information about the differences between social psychology and developmental attachment theory. Even some psychologists seem to be confused about Bowlby's use of the term attachment styles. Okay, so what do we do with this knowledge? Well, if you're a psychologist, a therapist, a coach, an educator, or influencer, this is a call to educate yourself on this topic. It's not your fault. There's just so little information about this out there. But it is important because you should base your advice and information on the best and most reliable sources. If you're a casual layperson, This information may not radically alter your life. Attachment theory, as presented today, is a blend of developmental and social psychology concepts. Just knowing the basics of attachment theory is plenty for most people. But also know that your adult attachment style, based on that quiz you took, may not accurately reflect the real things that are happening in your attachment system, and that taking those online quizzes repeatedly may not actually show real progress. You may want to consider finding a therapist who understands developmental attachment theory and can help you get properly assessed. The Adult Attachment Projective is a newer, faster derivative of the AAI that can be more affordable and easier to access. Lastly, you may start losing faith in people peddling social psychology attachment advice. These are the people who promote free online quizzes and that use terminology like attachment styles and fearful avoidant. Check the description for my resources and recommendations for people to follow and more. Like so many things in the world, attachment theory has, in many ways, fallen into an age-old pattern. It has betrayed its roots and gone mainstream. If you love attachment theory like I do, let this be a call to rediscover Bowlby, Ainsworth, and the developmental tradition, the true and original attachment theory. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.